Well, last time we were together, we left our hero, Boaz, and our heroine, Ruth. They were in a pile of barley. They were at the threshing floor, which was not a dance floor. There was no disco ball with those little light spots all around the room. There was no room. It was an open air space, and it was filled with a big pile of barley. Ruth had been watching Boaz, where he lay down. She went quietly, uncovered his feet, because it gets cool in the evening. And when he woke up, he realized his feet were cold. Sleeping in barley is a little like sleeping in a beanbag chair. You get a bit stiff. So he sat up, and behold, there was a woman at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" And she said, "I am your servant Ruth. Spread your wings over me, because you are a redeemer." I want us to take that sentence, and I think that we can do something with that to apply that to our own lives. Ultimately, Jesus is our Redeemer. And so we can say, like Ruth, "I am your servant," and then put in your own name. I'll put in my name, David. "I am your servant, David." We're speaking now to Jesus, our Redeemer. "Jesus, I am your servant, David. Spread your wings over me, for you are my Redeemer." This is, as the bride of Christ, this is the position we all find ourselves in. We are his bride, and he is our Redeemer. So why don't we say that together? We'll put in our own names. "I am your servant, David. Spread your wings over me, because you are my Redeemer." Let's try it again. "I am your servant, David. Spread your wings over me, because you are my Redeemer." Beautiful. Well, on that particular night, Boaz recognized that he was a redeemer, but there was a closer redeemer. So he told Ruth, "I would love to redeem you. I would love to be your husband, but there is yet a closer redeemer. And if he will redeem you, well and good. Lie down until morning, and we will sort this out tomorrow." Well, I'm sure Ruth, that was not what she wanted to hear, that there was another redeemer. That's news to her. Who is this man? Is he a nice guy? I came because I wanted to marry you, and now you're telling me I could be married to someone else tomorrow. I don't think she slept well. I don't think she was comfortable in her barley bed there. She was probably a little fidgety. So Ruth is praying, and Boaz is also trying to determine how he's going to present this. Because even though he said, "If the other Redeemer will redeem you, fine," as he lays down and tries to relax, he's thinking, I want to redeem her. I don't want someone else to redeem this woman. This is a good woman. This is not just any woman. So I believe he's lying in bed, barley bed, thinking how he's going to present this in a way so that this closer redeemer really doesn't want to redeem Ruth. Let's start in Ruth chapter 4, and I'm reading in the ESV. "Now Boaz had gone up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the Redeemer, of whom Boaz had spoken, came by. So Boaz said, "Turn aside, friend, sit down here." And he turned aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, is selling a parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. But if you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me, that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "The day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth, the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance." Then the Redeemer said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it." Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this was the manner of attestation in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself," he drew off his sandal. Then Boaz said to the elders and all of the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech, and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also, Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place." They were standing in the gate of his native place. "You are witnesses this day." Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem, and may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer. And may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, "A son has been born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful story. Let's go back and see what Boaz is thinking as he's going to present this case before the elders of the city. He knows that Ruth has some positives and negatives in the eyes of the people. He knows that Ruth is a humble woman. She's not entitled. She's a good servant. She's a hard worker. He's seen her gleaning in the field. He knows that she is a quality woman. He says, you are a worthy woman. She's waited patiently. She's not chased after other men, rich or poor. She's not been seductive. And she's come to Israel because she wants God. She thinks the God of Israel is the God to be served. It's worth whatever I go through to be around the people of this God and to be under his wings. But Boaz also knows how she is seen by the people of the town. She is a Moabite. And we've been talking about what it means to be a Moabite in Israel because Moab was an enemy of Israel. They they controlled Israel for 18 years during this period of the Judges, and they commanded tribute from Israel, basically because they had conquered them. So she is a social pariah. She's like a social leper, that people are staying away from her. And we have a hard time with that today because our whole culture is against prejudice. We have learned that prejudice is not good, and everyone prides themselves in not being prejudiced. If you went to the Middle East today, you would not find that people pride themselves into not being prejudiced. And if you went back 1,000 years or more, you would find that people did not pride themselves in not being prejudiced. They actually thought that the prejudice was good. The prejudice was protecting them, that they were not going to be taken in or swindled, or in this case, they were not going to be cursed. Because this woman, the Moabite, they believe is the cause of the deaths of 2 local boys who went to Moab and married Moabite women. And so 3 men in the family die. Obviously, that's not just a chance occurrence. Everyone's very superstitious, and they believe that this Moabite could have been the cause of death. And so if you marry her, you've got not just 2 dead men, you've got 2 dead local men, 2 men from Bethlehem that people knew. These were people who were known to the community. So they see this as a potential curse. Also, the woman's going to require support. So Boaz presents this as a field. It's very interesting. No one's mentioned the field at all until now. All of a sudden, this is all about a field. Brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. He is drawing the attention away from the treasure. And I want you to be thinking about this because Jesus tells a parable that I believe comes from this story. It involves a field, and it involves a treasure, and it involves covering up the treasure. Boaz presents this and says, do you want to buy the field? Oh, it's a businessman. We've got a destitute woman needs to sell a field. Absolutely, I'll buy the field. If you buy the field, and notice how he presents this, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite. Boaz hasn't used that language before. When he met Ruth in the field, it said Boaz said to Ruth. It's the first time that Ruth the Moabite wasn't mentioned. Boaz does not see Ruth as a Moabite. He sees with the eyes of God. And that's what he's trying to get us to see. How does God see people? What does he value? He tells the man there's a field, and then he tells him there's a way out. I will redeem it after you if you don't want it. So he makes sure the man knows he's not trapped. He presents the opportunity. The man says, yes, I want it. And then as soon as he says, you're going to acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, to raise up the inheritance of the dead, you can see what he's doing. He's brilliant. You get a Moabite and you've got two deads. And my version says, I can't redeem it lest I impair my inheritance. The Hebrew is much stronger. I think the King James says, lest I mar. I'm going to read you what that Hebrew word actually means, because in this case, the translators have softened this to try to make it more of a love story. Everything's nice and gentle, and they don't want Ruth seen as a social pariah. It's not a good love story. They want her seen as a respectable woman. This is what it means. That word, the word, lest I impair my own inheritance. In NIV, it says, I might endanger my own estate. That's even softer and gentler. The true Hebrew is, I might destroy my inheritance. I might corrupt my inheritance. I will ruin my inheritance. I will spoil my inheritance. See the words that are coming from this man. This is Ruth 4:6. I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it. The Hebrew verb shakath primarily conveys the idea of destruction or corruption. It is used in various contexts to describe physical destruction, moral corruption, or the spoiling of something good. In the ancient Near Eastern context, the concept of destruction was often associated with divine judgment, the curse, or moral decay. He's saying, this woman is cursed. I'm going to destroy my own. What inheritance is he talking about? He's probably in his 50s, 60s. He's talking about he probably has children of his own. And to bring this Moabite, he's afraid his kids are going to die. So he's saying, no, I don't want this. As Boaz predicts, he is refusing. I should say, as Boaz is hoping, he is refusing. And then, brilliantly, Boaz comes back. And so the man has no remorse as he's walking away. Remember, he has to remove his sandal. When you refuse to redeem someone in Israel, it was a humbling thing. Removing your sandal is not just any business transaction. That's kind of silly because you just have to now limp down to the shoemaker and get another one. You've got to either walk away barefoot or with one sandal. There's something humbling about giving someone your sandal as a deal attestation. It's part of the law that says if you refuse to marry the woman, you're supposed to give the woman the sandal who you don't want to marry. You don't want to redeem if you are the closest redeemer. It also says the woman is entitled to spit in your face if you refuse to redeem her. The man's saying, I'm getting away easy, I'm just going to give the sandal. And off he walks, but as he's walking off, Boaz doesn't want him to come back for his sandal. And so Boaz says, you are witnesses that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech. And also Ruth the Moabite I've bought for my wife. So he's saying all these things, so this man is not going to regret and change his mind. to perpetuate the name of the dead and his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off. He's so noble about all of this, perpetuating the name of the dead. And brilliantly, he marries Ruth, and everyone thinks that this is a beautiful thing that he's done. Although we'll talk in just a moment, not everyone thinks that this is great, because whenever you do something really good, you can be sure that you will have opposition. You will have people who don't want good things to be done, especially not for people who we don't like. Does anyone know the parable I'm talking about, where there is a field involved and a treasure involved, and someone who wants the field or the treasure? He wants the treasure, but he's going to buy the field. I believe that's what Jesus is talking about. It's Matthew 13:44. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. The kingdom of heaven is like this. Most of us, when we have heard that parable that Jesus tells, we believe and we've been taught that the treasure is Jesus. And you can read it that way. Jesus is a treasure. In other places in Scripture, he is certainly called the treasure, and we are the earthen vessels. In this particular case, however, I believe that Ruth is the treasure, and I believe that we are the treasure, and that Jesus buys the field. He pays for the sins of the world. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. He paid for the sins of the world. I just quoted John 3:16. But in John 17, Jesus says something interesting. He's talking with his disciples. He's saying, I'm praying for them. I'm not praying for the world. You have called them out of the world, and I'm praying for them. There are people who are treasures, and there are people who are a field to God. He loves them. He wants them to become treasure. Everyone has the opportunity to become treasure. We are all his offspring. We are not all his sons and daughters. And there's a distinction he makes. And many of us have a problem with that. We've been taught everyone's equal. Everyone maybe goes to heaven. I don't know how all you have to do is believe. There's no specialness about people. God says there is. I'm looking for hearts that are humbled. I'm looking for treasures. I'm looking for people who are responding to me. I'm actually looking for people who wait, who choose me, who want me. I love everybody, but these are the people I want in the kingdom. I want to pause now, and I want you to think of yourself as a treasure in the field. And I want to meditate on this parable of Jesus and the story that we've just heard, and put yourself in the place of Jesus wanting you because you're choosing him, because you're asking him. Remember, the woman who needs to be redeemed needs to ask. The treasure needs to want to be redeemed, needs to want this Redeemer to be the one. So let's pause and just think about that. As the people in the community begin to celebrate. Boaz and Ruth. They receive some compliments. May you be as Rachel and Leah. Then they receive a very interesting compliment that some of you may not understand. It is what we would call a backhanded compliment. And it is exactly the kind of thing that you would expect from a crowd of people who have just witnessed something very beautiful. There's always going to be someone who's going to give a compliment that's not really a compliment. May you be, let's just read it here. May your house be like the house of Perez. Now, if they would have stopped there, that would have been fine. House of Perez is a very successful house. They are all descendants of the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. This is like saying to a newlywed couple, may the son you have be like Solomon, who Bathsheba bore to David. Was that a compliment? Let's go to Genesis 38. This is a story that is one of the wildest in the Bible, so we don't want to miss it. To figure out who is Tamar and Judah. Judah is obviously the son of Jacob. He's one of the 12 tribes. And this is quite a story. It happened at the time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned aside to a certain Adullamite. I'm in Genesis 38, whose name was Hira. So Judah now, Judah has just come up with the idea to sell his brother Joseph to the Midianites to take him to Egypt. It says Judah moves away from his family. It was his idea to sell his brother. He sort of saved him because he didn't kill him like the other ones wanted to do, but it was his idea to sell him. And he sort of goes off the rails. There Judah saw a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. He took her and went into her, and she conceived and bore a son. He called his name Er. She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, called his name Shelah. Judah took a wife for Er, his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Er, Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. Boom. Doesn't give any details. This son of Judah was so wicked, and Canaanites are the people you don't want to marry. So he's involved in a Canaanite, and likely Tamar was also a Canaanite. Then Judah said to Onan, now here is the first example of the kind of marriage that Boaz and Ruth have. This is the first, and I believe the only other example in the Bible of what's called the Levy rite, the brother-in-law marriage. Judah said to Onan, the brother-in-law, go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. So whenever he went into his brother's wife, which sounds like on multiple occasions, he would waste the semen on the ground, so as not to give offspring to his brother. And what he did was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. 2 dead brothers. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house till Shelah, my young son, grows up, for he feared that he would die like his brothers. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. In the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shua's daughter, died. When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And when Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's garments. She's still wearing widow's garments all these years later, just sitting there waiting for the young boy to grow up. Covering herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown up, and he had not been given to him, and she had not been given to him in marriage. She is entitled. She's not working. She's dressed in widow's clothing, waiting for the third son. Why? She's married a wealthy man. She's married the son of a wealthy man, perhaps the wealthiest guy in town, and she's entitled not only to an inheritance, the firstborn gets double inheritance. She is not going to give up double inheritance, and whose job is it to make sure that she inherits? It's the brother-in-law's job. She's just sitting there and waiting. And she is entitled. When Judah saw her, he thought that she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. She's waiting on the side of the road. She's dressed like a prostitute. Turns out she's dressed like a cult prostitute, like a pagan prostitute, which gives us some idea of what's happening in Israel at the time. This is common, that you have sex with a woman. It's part of the worship. He turned to her at the roadside and said, "Come, let me come in to you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She says, "What will you give me that you may come in to me?" He answered, "I'll send you a young goat from the flock." And she said, "If you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord, and the staff that is in your hand." So he gave them to her, and he went in to her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away, taking off her veil and putting on the garments of her widowhood. So they go and try to find the woman to give her the goat. They said they're looking for the cult prostitute. There's no prostitute there. They can't find her. And 3 months later, they learn that Tamar is pregnant. Judah says, "Bring her out. Let's burn her. Let's kill her." He's so happy to finally get this woman off his chest. I don't have to give my son to her. She has now been a prostitute. She's committed immorality. She's pregnant by some man because of her prostitution. Let's kill her. She says, "I'm pregnant by the man who owns this signet ring and this staff." And he says, "She is more righteous than I, because I did not give her my son." That is how Perez is born. So what we have is a contrast, and what the complement that what I'm pointing out is when you do something good, when you do something beautiful. Boaz has married a good woman. Everyone may think that she was cursed or whatever. He knows that she's a good woman. And he is going to have to suffer a bit to marry her. And this is what I want to point out. When you do something good, we want the love story so that everyone claps and there's a big parade and everyone's happy for them. I'm telling you, not everyone is happy for them. May you be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Prostitute bore to her father-in-law. Right, an older man. The whole thing is a slur, but you can't really take it like that because it's in the Bible, and we're supposed to, well, it's a backhanded compliment. You can't really say anything about it. I want to pause and let us think about something perhaps that you have done that has been good, that has been noble, that has been honorable, honest. And people have criticized you. They have not rejoiced for you. They have not been happy for you that something good has happened to you. In fact, they probably are a little jealous. Boaz is one of the wealthiest men in town. I don't think all the women are happy for Ruth, the Moabite. So let's pause and let's take this to God. Jesus put up with a lot while he was here. They even said that he was doing his miracles by the power of the devil. The Son of God came to earth, does nothing but good. And people say, yeah, that good, that is the power of the devil working. They tried to tear him down. Everything beautiful he did, they tried to separate him from his people. If you had gotten healed by Jesus, and now the religious leaders, all the educated people said that's actually by the power of the devil, how do you feel about your healing now? Are you going to tell anybody? You see how evil this is, how evil people love to put doubts in people's mind. And that's what's happening here. I want you to think about that and take it to God, because he will reward you for doing good, for doing right, for representing him. And I believe that Boaz was representing him, but it's going to cost him, and it's going to cost you, and it's going to cost me to do the right thing. So let's pause and talk to God about it. I want to summarize now the Book of Ruth. There are a lot of things we could say about the Book of Ruth. But I want to contrast how the book starts with how the book ends. And the characters that start off the book, Elimelech, his name means God is my king. He and Naomi and his two sons go to Moab. And I want to do a little sort of role-playing to try to imagine what was happening and why they went to Moab. Because I want to see what God values. I want us to notice what God values in the Book of Ruth. We notice at the end of the Book of Ruth, it says in Ruth 4:17, and the woman of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. A son has been born to Naomi? Is that who the son was born to? Do you see? Do you understand what is happening here? That Ruth doesn't really matter so much. This is the kind of pain that you face when you're doing the right thing. You may not be applauded. You may not be everyone's favorite. You are not going to be paraded as the really good person. You're going to be overlooked. A son has been born to Naomi. One of our local girls is going to be okay. Glad the Moabite was able to help out. So imagine that I'm having a conversation. Let's say that we are the community here that was similar to the community in Bethlehem. And we all have farms, and it hasn't rained in the last couple of years much. Our fields are not doing well. The grain is, well, we're not producing as much. And I come up and I say, you know, I want to leave. I think I should go to Las Vegas. There's work at the casinos there. And someone says to me, well, I don't think it's a good idea. That, you know, God has given us these fields. He's given us this land. Why don't we seek him? Why don't we fast and pray and get together more than just once a week? We'll get together, one other night, and we'll all pray together. Maybe on Wednesdays we'll fast for half a day at least, and fasting. Barbaric. You mean miss a meal? No. That's silly. No, God, He wants us to honor Him. And maybe we could, as a community, we could turn off some of our social media and our TVs and our news reports, gaming, and our phones, and we could spend more time listening to His Word and learning about Him and speaking about Him. And I think it would honor Him to use our time better. Maybe for 6 weeks we could try it. I mean, Elimelech, your name means God is my king. I mean, He's the king. Let's honor Him as the king. If He was the king, He should be taking care of me, says Elimelech. I haven't seen any miracles from God in years, maybe since we came out of Egypt. And so Elimelech and his family go to Moab. And as I'm role-playing that I would go to work in a casino, instead of taking 6 weeks and fasting and praying and seeking the Lord and humbling ourselves before Him, saying, we come to religious services, but during the week, not so much. We watch a lot of TV and news and maybe movies and things we shouldn't. I wonder if we could honor Him more. I wonder especially if we did it all together as a community, it would show God. I mean, He's looking for people. He's looking for treasures. And I believe, and this is a very strong statement, that the Book of Ruth is saying God prefers and is willing to trade 3 proud, self-sufficient men like Elimelech for 1 humble woman like Ruth. We don't like it. That's a hard truth. God says, I will let them go, and I will trade 3 of them for 1 of these. And I want us, as we conclude this book, to look honestly at ourselves. What do I do that honors the Lord, and what do I do that doesn't honor the Lord? And how could I change, especially if I'm praying and asking for something from the Lord, maybe for finances or health or prosperity for our country or whatever it is. We all need something. What about some disciplines? What about some effort that we might want to put into it, besides just saying, God helps those who help themselves. Show me the money. That's basically Elimelech was saying, well, the world has greener grass over there, and I'm an educated man. I'm going where the grass is greener. And Ruth said, I want to be educated. I don't know the Lord, but I know that's the answer. I want to be educated in the ways of God. And I have done my best to teach you the ways of God in the Book of Ruth. And I hope that we can apply these things that we've learned and humble ourselves and serve, but get to know God because He's beautiful. And we will suffer, and we will be like Him. As we suffer, we will take our suffering to Him, and we will become the bride of Christ. We will fellowship in the suffering. As Paul says, Philippians 3:10, that I may know Him and the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His sufferings. That I may know Him and the power of His resurrection and the fellowship of His sufferings. So let's pray. Father, I thank You for this book. I thank You for Your incredible love for us. I thank You that Obed was born to Ruth and Boaz, and Obed means worshiper. You wanted people to worship You, and he was the grandfather of David, who wrote many of the Psalms and was such a worshiper. Lord, you're looking for worshipers, and we want to worship you in spirit and in truth, the way you want to be worshiped. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you, and lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. Go in peace. Bless you.